In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, December 29th, year of our Lord 2025. We won't be saying 2025 very much longer. I hope you had a much better Christmas than Trump. He spent it raging on social media, plotting for more wars. It must be the effect of the 12 days of Epstein and the documents you weren't supposed to see. Yeah, well, we'll talk about what's up for the new year. Happy New Wars. That looks like that's what's on the menu. Also, there's some very important information about silver that we're going to talk about. It's been a great year for silver, but there may be some things that you need to be aware of that you might want to defend against. And speaking of defense, they've got Bill Gates and Albert Bourla, Mark Rutte, the usual suspects, you know. They've actually got a lawsuit in the Netherlands. And this lawsuit is about the bioweapon being, the Trump shot being a bioweapon, as I've said for the longest time. So we're going to talk about that as well. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, I really do hope that you had a nice Christmas. We did. We had the time off, as you know. And I couldn't very well make my staff work days that Trump was giving the people in Washington, D.C. off. I mean, Trump hates the federal workers, and he gave them Wednesday and Friday off last week. So I actually love my workers here, so I'm not going to make them work on those days that Trump gives them off. But I hope you had a good holiday weekend. It was a good time of rest for us. Well, Trump, unfortunately, wasn't resting himself. He delivered a deranged threat to TV networks in his Yuletide meltdown. Christmas ba Trump bug. Yeah, that's a headline from the Daily Beast. He wanted Stephen Colbert put to sleep. Euthanize him, I guess. Trump was not really in the Christmas spirit of peace on earth and goodwill to all. As a matter of fact, he's not really looking at peace on earth either.
You're listening to the David Knight Show. And now, the David Knight Show.
Well, let's continue on with this pharmaceutical stuff. We don't want to forget Trump's role in all this stuff. Bill Gates, Pfizer's CEO Albert Bourla, of course, now they're business partners. Isn't that interesting? Trump introduces Albert Bourla about their new partnership to make money killing people. And the crowd boos Albert Bourla.
We also have the head of Pfizer here, so I want to thank him. One of the great people, one of the great businessmen. Thank you, Albert. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Boos Albert Bourla. Trump just shoves it off. Yeah, you guys, you love me enough that you'll forget that I am partnered with this guy. Gates and Bourla have been ordered to testify in a Dutch COVID vaccine injury lawsuit. It relates to a lawsuit filed in 2023. 7 people injured by the COVID-19 vaccines, so-called. One of the victims has since died. The lawsuit centers around the question of whether the COVID-19 injections are a bioweapon. They are. That's what I've said all along. The suit names 15 other defendants, including former Dutch Prime Minister and current NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, the Dutch state, several Dutch public health officials, and journalists. Defendants are accused of misleading victims about the safety and the efficacy of the vaccines. It remains to be seen whether the defendants will comply with the court's order and appear this next year in a hearing. A second lawsuit was filed in March by 3 COVID-19 injury victims in the Netherlands, presenting a similar set of allegations and names the same defendants. Again, the Dutch are leading the way in this stuff. This is the only country in which there's been any pushback against this massive conspiracy to commit mass murder by government and to usher in a new technocracy. Travel permits for everything. Universal basic income because we're going to shut down your business. It's just amazing to me that everybody just took this, except the Dutch, who are now awake, I think, because of Mark Rutte and because of the attacks on the farms. Interesting thing is, the expert witnesses, the very first one mentioned in this article from Children's Self Defense is Catherine Austin Fitts. Good for her. Good for her. Solari Report, former Assistant Secretary of HUD. Sasha Latipova, former Pharmaceutical Research and Development Executive. Joseph Sasson, a psychotherapist who's litigating to prohibit the mRNA vaccines in Florida. And Catherine Watt, who I don't know, researcher and paralegal. Michael Yaden, one of my heroes, a pharmacologist, former vice president of Pfizer's Allergy and Respiratory Research Unit. He's been very explicit for the longest time that this is a deliberate move. These things don't just happen. He said this was deliberate. They know every ingredient that they put in. And you look at these ingredients and how harmful they are. He said this was deliberate. This was a poisoning. He's made the case it's a bioweapon. I played a clip for you last week of Michael Yaden being very clear about this. Good for him. In October 2024, one district court rejected Gates' motion to dismiss the case, ruling that it has jurisdiction over him and ordering him to pay defendants' legal fees. In June 2025, the plaintiffs increased their claims against defendants and petitioned the court to accept the expert witness testimony that has been recorded. They're trying to get them in court to testify in person because it's more powerful than giving a video deposition. But the expert witnesses have now released a series of YouTube videos presenting their evidence and talking about what they would say given a chance. So the lawyer for them, Stassen is his name, submitted written statements and recorded video statements by the expert witnesses to the district court. The second lawsuit kicked off in March. In August, the district court denied the application, saying that the defendants lacked standing. In September, the lawyer filed an appeal alleging that the court did not afford the plaintiffs a fair trial in violation of the European Convention on Human Rights and calling on the court to allow the expert witnesses to testify in court. During last week's public conference, the lawyer Stassen said the plaintiffs and the broader public, quote, are victims of people who unjustly suppress the truth. That's what the cancellation and the shadow banning was all about. As a matter of fact, I put up some stuff and I saw that maybe like 100 people saw the post I put up when I'm supposed to have about 140,000 followers. And so I asked Grok itself, I said, so how do I ask it questions about shadow banning? He said, well, Twitter or X says it doesn't shadow ban, but Grok says, but it does. And here's how you test it. And yes, it is severely shadow banned. First I gave it the stats, and it says, well, that is highly unusual. Might be shadow banned. Here's how you can test it. I did test it. It's still being suppressed. Nothing is being changed. The suppression of the truth, my clients were misled. Had they not been misled, they would have not gotten the COVID-19 shot. A shot that the suppressors of the truth still tout as safe and effective to this day. And that is Albert Bourla's reply to this lawsuit. Stassen also noted that his efforts to have the Dutch courts accept expert witness in-person testimony. He said the witnesses tend to present evidence showing that the COVID-19 shots are indistinguishable from bioweapons, that they have no health benefits whatsoever, they are neither safe nor effective, they're released in the U.S. under emergency authorization by a Trump administration executive. All these guys came from and went back to Big Pharma, all the people in Trump's administration. He had 2 FDA directors. One went to Pfizer, the other one went to Moderna. His HHS director came from Eli Lilly. He was the one who first declared a pandemic when there weren't any cases even that they could allege. I think there's 3 people that they alleged had COVID-19. That's not a pandemic. 3 cases in all of the United States, and nobody had died. And so, what was it with this emergency authorization and Trump pushing this thing through? He removed all the tests. He removed any inspection of this. He just rushed this thing through. That's how he got it through so fast. That's not a feature. That's a bug. How in the world does he get away with bragging about the fact that he shut down all testing and all regulation of this stuff? And they have shut down and lied about the people that have been harmed by it. So by design, they were intended to cause the damage that's described in the package insert as reported side effects. Things like a side effect like sudden death, heart failure, cancer, the most horrific diseases. A key component of the Great Reset is what this was. It was a military project in which NATO plays a significant role. Hence Mark Rutte and why they brought him in there. Of course it was a military project. As I've said over and over again, it was the other shoe to drop from the inside job of 9/11. It was 2 months before 9/11 that they ran their first germ game, Dark Winter, and they practiced it for 20 years. They rolled this stuff out with the military taking the lead. It was a military mass murder. Sansone told the defender that he and other expert witnesses are advocating to testify in court, as this can be more influential than written testimony. He said he intends to provide evidence that the COVID-19 vaccines, so-called vaccines, are bioweapons, violating the Biological Weapons Convention and the Biological Weapons and Anti-Terrorism Act of 1989, which was authored by the late Francis Boyle, Ph.D., an expert witness in the original lawsuit who died in January. And I guess if he was an expert witness in this, I guess he finally came around to the understanding that this is a bioweapon. When I was pushing back on this at InfoWars, and Alex was pushing that the pandemic was real, that the vaccines were nothing but sugar water, and you could take it for Trump. Yeah, of course it's going to have some adjuvants in it, but you can take this. Do it for Trump. And so Alex had me on. I didn't realize that Alex was doing that at the time. And I didn't know that this was going to be set up as a faux debate between me and Francis Boyle. Francis Boyle believing and telling people at the time that the COVID-19 thing was a lab leak and that it was a real pandemic. I pushed back against that. I haven't gone back. Ryan sent me a link to the actual programming, so find it at the internet, at the InfoWars archives. But I haven't gone back and looked. I don't like watching myself, and I'm sure if I watched it, I'd be very disappointed in what I did. I don't know that I made a good case for it. I'm not a great debater. I just was right. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I say it with sadness because I look at the people who have been harmed by this. And I just wish we could have gotten this information out. I wish I could have done a better job. It's difficult when it's, first of all, I didn't know that this was coming up. It's like one of these things, hey, Alex, I'd like to come and do the show. So I walk in cold with this stuff. I don't know this is going to be a debate. It's not really a debate when it's 2 against 1, and the moderator's got his thumb on the scale. But now we see that he was an expert witness to say that it was a bioweapon. Well, good. Sasha Latipova told the defender that the lawsuits are the only ones worldwide that allege that COVID was not a public health event, but a government project That's right, going back to Dark Winter. That resulted in mass casualty that can be characterized as genocide, or more broadly as democide, death by government of the population. In her statement, Latypova alleged the military governance and contracts were used to develop, procure, deliver, distribute these shots all over the world, and to bypass standard regulatory oversight procedures for pharmaceutical products. Yeah, that's the thing. The alt media is still pushing this China lab leak. I had some guy respond to the Monster Jab movie, that clip that we did, and said, you're pathetic trying to pat yourself on the back for being right. It's like, no, pal. There's people who really believe that it was a real pandemic. There's people who really believe that it leaked out of the lab. There's people who really believe that the government did the best job that it could. I'm simply trying in a satire to tell people that is not the case. We got a lot of criminal conspirators who did this to people, and they're going to do it again if they don't answer for this stuff. They're already plotting it. There is substantial evidence of non-compliance with good manufacturing practices, she said, which is the law that governs pharmaceutical purity and honesty in labeling all over the world. Well, of course, they knew that. And I reported at the time, Stat News, which is a pharmaceutical publication. It's not critical of pharmaceutical industry. And they pointed out that Pfizer was blackmailing 3 South American countries, saying, you'll give us immunity against unsafe manufacturing processes, against negligence, not just on the fact that this is experimental, but you'll give us broad immunity, and you'll back it up by pledging assets in other countries, embassies and other things like that. And we already see some countries who are up against financial hardship selling their embassies, because that's property and real estate in other countries that they can sell. So Pfizer demanded that as protection. One of the South American countries went along with it. The other 2 did not, and they went public with it. If I remember correctly, I think it was Argentina and Brazil. According to Catherine Austin Fitz, global central banks and financial institutions were involved in these efforts. She said the pandemic represented an egregious misuse of healthcare policies to implement economic and political agendas. That's right. With the goal of engineering a great reset of the global financial system. And we are still suffering the consequences of that. Yaden said that since 2020, he has attempted to warn the public that the COVID-19 vaccines were designed to lower the fertility rate and people's health and to reduce population. He said that even though he was censored on social media for making such comments, he said, this is what I have watched happen around me for 5 years. So several of the defendants, including Bourla, Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, Mark Rutte, the former prime minister, now head of NATO, and the Dutch state sought to block the testimony of the plaintiff's expert witnesses. Gates was the only defendant who deferred to the court's judgment on this point. In September, Gates and Bourla submitted written statements of defense. In his statement, Gates says he doesn't have any connection or influence over the policies of international bodies such as the World Health Organization, except it's a matter of record that he gives more than virtually every other country in terms of money to them, except for the U.S., one of the largest contributors, more than most nations. But he says he doesn't have any influence with them. Albert Bourla has maintained that the Trump shot is safe and effective. And of course, Trump continues to cheer him. He's now a business partner of his. And Trump will never admit that this was a bioweapon. He's the father of the bioweapon. He's the father of the lockdown. He's the father of the digital ID. He's the father of universal basic income. Government program for compensating vaccine injuries is unconstitutional. That is the PrEP Act. This is a lawsuit filed in the United States saying that people can't, trying to get compensation for people who have been injured by the Trump bioweapon. 2 women with support from Children's Health Defense are suing the government agency that oversees the compensation program for the vaccine injuries. They allege the program violated their constitutional rights by setting eligibility criteria that's so restrictive that neither woman can qualify for compensation. Just remember, the PrEP Act was put in by George Bush. Dark winter happened under George Bush 2 months before 9/11. The model legislation was put out to states after the anthrax attack that happened 1 week after it. And then he prepared for all this stuff with the PrEP Act. Well, their prepping was to take away anybody getting any compensation for the massive depopulation program that's going to be coming. This is how the globalists operate. They have a very, very long timeline. And of course, that was Republican George W. Bush. Now we got Republican Donald Trump, who executes it and then sets up a corrupt election system to guarantee that he's not going to get reelected. So he can turn it over to the Democrats and to make sure that everybody is confused as to what's going on. But if you go back to the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Compensation Act, or whatever they called it, but it basically took away your right to get compensation if your child is injured with the pharmaceutical stuff that's there. 1986, that was Fauci. But it's also Reagan who signed that in. So we got Reagan, we got Bush, we got Trump. Don't talk to me about Republicans being the lesser of two evils. Come on, wake up. I've heard that for too long. A lesser of two evils is still evil, but these guys are not necessarily even lesser. They just focus on different evils. That's the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. They typically have a different evil agenda, and they're going to come after you in a different way, but they'll both come in after you. So the claim has to be filed within 12 months after the injury occurred. This is even worse than the pedophile protection that they've got in there with statute of limitations. You know, when Jeffrey Epstein or Trump rape a child, they get 3 years to blow the whistle on them. Of course, that doesn't happen, and they know that. But here, many of these people don't know for sure what's going on for 12 months. Strange things are happening to them. And so Ray Flores said the program's definition of serious physical injury is arbitrary. The federal government defines serious physical injury as injuries that are life-threatening, that result in permanent impairment of a body function or permanent damage to body structure, or require medical or surgical intervention to preclude permanent impairment of a body function or permanent damage of a body structure. And of course, we've seen this happen over and over again with this, and yet they're not compensating anybody. So these two defendants allege the vaccine caused multiple injuries that have impaired their ability to work and live normal lives, but they say that their injuries fall short of the threshold established by the CICP. It is fundamentally unjust and unconstitutional under the U.S. Constitution for someone to suffer substantial injury and have absolutely no path to recovery or accountability, said Mary Holland of Children's Self-Defense. And what makes this worse is that the substantial injury has come to them from the government itself. That's why it's being denied. Potentially millions of people have suffered tremendous harms that the government does not consider to be serious and have been left without any remedy as a result. So this one person, again, you got to get there within 12 months. She saw 105 doctors over 2.5 years and substantial painful symptoms. She developed autoimmune disorder, small fiber neuropathy, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, called POTS, mast cell activation syndrome, tinnitus, heart palpitations, leaving her unable to work. This is after 2 doses of the Trump poison. The other person received 2 doses of Moderna's Trump poison in 2021. The other one was Pfizer. The vaccines caused her to develop high blood pressure, tachycardia, pelvic pain, tremors, leg numbness, weight loss, frequent urination, and insomnia. She had to sit upright for several months. While the injuries have subsided somewhat from their zenith, the plaintiffs remain impaired and have no access to any remedy. Unlike prior cases challenging the PrEP Act, The new lawsuit is narrowly pled to show that plaintiffs and the vast majority of the injured are left without any remedy whatsoever. The sole exception to the PrEP Act's liability shield is willful misconduct, defined as intentional acts or omissions done with knowledge that harm is highly probable. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the scientists at Children's Self-Defense noticed that they were encapsulating this mRNA in PEG, polyethylene glycol. It's called pegylated. And they saw that, and the scientists said, a lot of people are allergic to that. If you inject that into people, that's going to cause them to go into anaphylactic shock. And contacted the FDA, and the FDA said, we don't care. Call Pfizer and let them know. Of course, Pfizer, when he contacted them, they didn't care. And so, is that willful misconduct? Does Pfizer know that it is willful misconduct when they are seeking to have extraordinary legal immunity for the harm that they know they're going to do with these vaccines, threatening and blackmailing 3 countries? Because again, this is at the point where if you don't get the shots globally, all of these governments, and I've said it so many times, it doesn't matter what political party, it doesn't matter what claimed political philosophy they have, they were all conspiring together. This was a global conspiracy of the leaders of every single country. How can people not be upset with this? This is so large, and people just got tired of the masks and the silly 6 feet apart rules and just stopped complying, walked away, and left it at that. They didn't come back and say, wait a minute, we need to bring these people to heel. It's amazing. However, the PrEP Act requires that willful misconduct claims first be adjudicated through CICP, even though CICP bars claims that fall below its serious physical injury threshold. So this creates a classic unconstitutional catch-22 scenario for prospective claimants, according to the lawsuit. Yeah, they war-gamed this thing out. Former U.S. Health Secretary under Biden, Javier Becerra, declared the end of the COVID-19 public health emergencies in May of 2023. However, the declarations did not end a separate public health emergency that leaves the Trump shot covered under the PrEP Act. Yeah, they play these little legal games with us, don't they? And that's what Javier Becerra was. He was brought in. Trump had as his head of HHS a former CEO of Eli Lilly, who was going to run this whole thing through and create the vaccine. Then Biden was the one who was going to push it as a requirement and was going to make sure that they maintained legal immunity for the pharmaceutical companies. So they brought in a lawyer. Nobody with a medical experience, but they brought in a lawyer, Javier Becerra, to shepherd this thing through, to use what Trump, this bioweapon that Trump had created with his pharmaceutical administration. Just before the end of Biden's term, Becerra extended the PrEP Act's liability shield for COVID-19 countermeasures until December 31st, 2029. It was the 12th extension since 2020. As of December the 1st, CICP has compensated only 42 vaccine-related claims out of 14,000 claims filed, less than 0.3%. A lot of people don't know about this. A lot of people look at it and say, well, they're not going to pay me. Why bother? The median payout for a COVID-19 vaccine injury has been just over $4,000, $4,100. However, the average payout is $155,000. That is skewed by 2 unusually large payouts. Without those 2 large payouts, the average compensation amount would fall to $5,100. And when I look at this, I think about another Republican, Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio. He was the one who came up with the $1 million vaccine lottery. Isn't that amazing? So there's never been a successful challenge to the CICP. So we'll see what happens with it. Meanwhile, Rod Snyder is criticized by left-wing Mediaite because he brags that he beat Gavin Newsom's vaccine rules Newsom put in a vaccine rule saying you're not going to have any concerts unless you got less than 1,000 people. He says, oh, okay, well, we'll have 999. That way nobody gets sick, right? It's interesting. Media criticizes him for this. The liberals hate Trump, but they love his bioweapon. The MAGA people hate the bioweapon, but they love Trump, who brags about being the father of it. So I say, America has gone mad. M-A-D. Make America double-think. They can't, neither the left nor the right can connect the dots on any of this stuff. Rob Snyder said he beat Newsom's COVID-19 check requirements by lowering his ticket sales to $999 to avoid the state mandate that you would have to check people's vaccine cards to come to an event. So in a December 20th interview, he said, in California, Gavin Newsom closed churches, but he kept open strip clubs, which I appreciated, he said. And he kept open the liquor stores and the weed stores. And it was like, what? Then he closed private businesses. He said, if you have more than 1,000 people when you perform, then they have to bring their vaccine card. So I said, okay, just sell 999 tickets. I'm not going to force anyone to do anything. He said, this was all a form of coercion, something out of the 1940s with the Japanese internment camps. An American citizen, all of a sudden you weren't. So you always have to be aware historically that you're an American citizen until you're not, because these Japanese citizens had everything taken away from them and were thrown into camps. We've seen something like that today under Trump. He's not going to criticize Trump, actually. He's a big fan of Trump. These were American citizens, so that's something that we need to be aware of. Under COVID, we're able to see your small business, your restaurant, shuttered, your ability to make money, your ability to take care of your family stopped. And what they do? They printed money and all this stuff. At the same time, at the taxpayers' expense, devaluing all of our money and setting in effect this massive ramp up of the federal deficit. The one thing that Trump will never talk about, the government deficit. Hillary called us deplorable. Trump called us non-essential. And he bankrupted Main Street mom and pop businesses because he wanted to push stimulus, train people about universal basic income. He said, we have to warn Americans of the potential of this country to become authoritarian. Sorry, it was in 2020. It was authoritarian. And it was just insanity. I really feel like I don't want the Democrat Party trying to run my life, he said. And there's not one aspect of your life that they don't want to interfere with. See, again, he falls back into the partisan mind trap. It's not just Democrats who are destroying your life. It's Republicans who are creating the military bioweapon. It's Republicans who actually did the lockdown. The lockdown stuff was all Trump. Some of it was continued, yes. But the lockdown stuff that happened in 2020 was all Trump. And the money that he paid to hospitals to kill people was 100% on Trump. And people like Peter Navarro that he brought back. So, again, what about Trump? What about Bush? What about Reagan? What about the profits for the pharmaceutical companies? What about the military depopulation program and the global conspiracy of all of these governments that was a part of that? Yeah, let's not think about that. It'd be too scary, right? Well, we got some comments here. Travis, I've been talking for a while. I'll let you read the comments.
That's right. We've got Mark Young. He says, in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, list of tyrannical acts of King George III. This is a list of King Trump's oath violations, crimes, and broken promises. We have Ben Laden Bernanke. He says, it's permissible to have our military be violently attacked, the USS Liberty, in 1967, because that's Israel. But if any one of the urban peasants harms a hair of our jackboots, then it's on.
That's right. You don't even film them. Filming them is an act of terrorism, now we're told. Yeah. They're in public.
Nibiru 2029. They didn't create a vaccine for a COVID virus. They created the COVID scamdemic for the vaccine.
That's right. That's what Dark Winter was all about.
Cicada 17 Says yesterday was Reflection Sunday at our church with an open mic. One man listed off 10 people close to him that died over the past year. All I could think was, it's that poison shot. And Max, we all have this play acting in Minnesota, Trump pretending he's going after the leadership, but Waltz is starting a new Somalidi charity programs and declaring his run for a third term. Such amazing chutzpah. Would be my guess Trump and Waltz are in the same club, just playing opposing positions. Like Soros. Has he been arrested yet? All BS.
That's so true. Yes. Is that it? Is that all the comments we got?
Yes.
We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back.
God does you marry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born. Remember Christ our Savior King. Christmas bells merrily ring, tell of the world Jesus is King.
Thank you for watching The Bad Civil Servant on YouTube and North American House Hippo on Rumble. The only channels where you don't have to like and subscribe if you don't want to.
Mr. President, I have ordered the immediate revocation of his green card. Smell you later.